Have you ever stared at your shift schedule and thought, Lord, is this really what you planned for me? You're not alone. Thousands of nurses, strong, compassionate, faith-driven professionals, are quietly breaking under the weight of exhaustion. Long hours, endless charting, emotional overload, and somewhere in the chaos, your faith starts to flicker. You pray on your way to work, but by the end of your shift, even the prayer feels tired. But here's the twist. What if burnout isn't the enemy? What if it's actually God's invitation to rewrite your shift plan? Sounds crazy, right? Yet that's exactly what faith in medicine is about. Trusting that even in the fluorescent-lit hallways of your hospital, God is moving. Maybe this season isn't about surviving your job, but about rediscovering your calling, the purpose in healthcare that first lit that fire in your heart. This video isn't about quick fixes or sugar-coated self-care tips. It's about faith for nurses who feel like they've reached their breaking point. It's about finding God in the workplace, reclaiming your peace, and learning how to let Him lead, even when the call lights won't stop ringing. By the end of this, you won't just have a shift plan, you'll have a spiritual roadmap for your next chapter. When the calling becomes a burden. There comes a moment in every nurse's journey when the job that once felt sacred starts to feel heavy, like the joy leaked out somewhere between the night shifts and the never-ending charting. Many Christian nurses start out believing they're part of God's plan for healing, only to find themselves questioning that purpose in healthcare when burnout hits. The scrubs still fit, but the heart feels worn. And in those moments, faith for healthcare professionals can seem like a distant memory rather than a daily anchor. Imagine Sarah, a nurse who used to whisper a quick nurse prayer before every shift. Lately she's stopped, not because she's lost faith, but because she's simply too tired to talk. That's how nurse burnout often begins, quietly, subtly, almost unnoticeable until it swallows your peace. But even in that silence, God's still speaking. Sometimes He doesn't change the workload, He changes you. That's the mystery of faith and burnout. It's not about escaping the fire, it's about learning what God is refining within it. If the calling feels like a burden, maybe it's time to ask, not why me, Lord, but what are you trying to show me through this? Because when you start to see your daily rounds as part of a divine shift plan, everything changes. The hospital becomes more than a workplace. It turns into a ministry, a living classroom of faith and compassion. And just when you think you can't go on, that's often where the next revelation begins to unfold. The hidden ministry behind every shift. Most nurses don't realize they're already preaching sermons without ever standing behind a pulpit. Every time a Christian nurse comforts a frightened patient, holds a trembling hand, or whispers a quiet prayer in a hospital hallway, that's faith and healthcare in motion. God's plan for nurses isn't just about healing bodies, it's about touching souls. This is where spiritual encouragement for nurses becomes real, in the everyday moments that look ordinary but carry eternal weight. Think about it. When you show compassion to a patient who's angry or scared, that's not just good bedside manner, that's ministry. It's faith for nurses in its purest form. Christian healthcare workers are often the only glimpse of God's love that some patients will ever see. So even when your scrubs are stained and your patience is thin, your work still echoes with divine purpose. The fourth lines, the monitors, the late-night prayers, they're all threads in a bigger story God is weaving through your life. And the beautiful part? You don't have to add anything to do this ministry, you just have to recognize it. When you start to see your shifts through God's eyes, every room becomes holy ground. You stop seeing burnout as punishment and start seeing your presence as a calling. Because sometimes, the most powerful form of preaching doesn't come from a stage. It comes from the quiet strength of a nurse who refuses to give up. And that realization opens the door to something deeper still. When faith becomes the shift leader. There's a moment when every Christian nurse realizes that medicine alone can't carry them anymore. Charts, checklists, and protocols can't comfort a grieving family or steady a trembling heart at 3 a.m. That's when faith steps up and takes the lead. When faith becomes the shift leader, you stop relying on your strength and start leaning on God's presence. It's not about being perfect, it's about being peaceful in the chaos, knowing the great physician is still on call. Picture this. You're in the middle of a hectic shift, alarms blaring, patients calling, and the stress feels unbearable. But instead of spiraling, you take a deep breath and whisper a simple nurse prayer. Lord, take over. That moment of surrender is powerful. It's faith in medicine, where science meets spirit. It's choosing to trust that God's purpose for healthcare workers includes rest for the weary heart. Suddenly, your steps feel lighter, not because the load disappeared, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. When faith leads your shift, you start seeing divine appointments in every hallway encounter. A coworker venting about their burnout. Maybe that's your cue to offer spiritual encouragement for nurses like yourself. A patient afraid of surgery. Perhaps that's your chance to share hope for caregivers, a soft word that reminds them they're not alone. And just as faith begins to lead your steps, something remarkable happens. You start rediscovering your joy. But there's an even deeper layer to this transformation. Rediscovering purpose in the pressure. Somewhere between endless night shifts and back-to-back double shifts, many nurses forget why they started. What began as a calling to bring healing turns into a routine of exhaustion. But here's the truth. Purpose in healthcare isn't lost. It's just buried under the weight of responsibility. When Christian nurses pause long enough to breathe and ask, Lord, remind me why I'm here, something powerful happens. God starts peeling back the layers of burnout to reveal the passion that's still alive beneath it. Faith-based nursing isn't about ignoring the stress. It's about inviting God into it. Imagine you're charting at 2 a.m., running on coffee and prayers, and suddenly you sense peace, a still, quiet reminder that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. That's God's whisper, realigning your heart with His plan. Faith for healthcare professionals means understanding that every patient interaction, every long shift, is part of a bigger mission. Your hospital isn't just a workplace. It's a mission field where compassion becomes the language of faith. So when the pressure builds, remember, it's often in those very moments that God refines your purpose. You begin to see burnout recovery for nurses not as a retreat, but as a return to joy, to meaning, to divine alignment. The challenge is learning how to hold on to that rediscovered sense of calling, even when life outside the hospital gets noisy. Because once you find that peace again, the next step is learning how to protect it. Protecting your peace and living the calling. Once a nurse rediscovers their purpose, the next challenge is keeping it alive amid the chaos. Faith and compassion can't thrive in constant noise. Protecting your peace becomes a sacred act, one that honors both your calling and your Creator. Christian healthcare workers often think that serving others means ignoring their own needs, but that's not God's plan for nurses. Even Jesus rested. Protecting your peace means setting boundaries, praying before reacting, and learning to say no when your soul says enough. Picture Emily, a nurse who started her day with a short devotion in the car before her shift. She asked God to help her bring calm where there was chaos. Throughout the day, she paused between patients to breathe and thank God for small victories, a smile, a stabilized patient, a comforting word. That's what nurse devotion looks like in action. Tiny moments of worship woven into the workday. It's practical, it's personal, and it's powerful. This is how faith for nurses grows roots deep enough to withstand any storm. When you learn to live from peace instead of exhaustion, your entire environment begins to change. Colleagues notice your calm, patients sense your strength, and you become a source of spiritual encouragement for nurses around you. That's the ripple effect of godly peace. It multiplies. And as you live your calling from that place of rest and faith, you'll discover something incredible. God doesn't just want to rewrite your shift plan, He wants to rewrite your life. If your soul has been running on fumes, maybe this is your wake-up call, the gentle kind that comes from God, not your alarm clock. You've seen that faith and healthcare aren't two separate worlds. They're beautifully intertwined. The long nights, the quiet prayers, the moments of doubt, they all lead back to one truth. You were never meant to do this alone. God's purpose for healthcare workers like you is not just survival, it's transformation. He wants you to find peace in nursing, to work from His strength, not your own. So ask yourself, what if this season of burnout isn't punishment but preparation? What if God is using your exhaustion to teach you how to rest in Him? Are you ready to stop surviving your shift and start thriving in your calling? Remember, the same God who called you into nursing hasn't changed his mind about you. He's still guiding, still restoring, still writing your story, one shift, one prayer, one heartbeat at a time. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with another nurse who might need the reminder that faith in medicine still matters. And before you go, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and join our community of Christian nurses rediscovering their purpose every week. Let's walk this journey together, trusting God to rewrite our shift plans and our lives.